Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Saul Weinreb, your host for the podcast, and today we are doing Isaiah 38. However, I'm going to start with the last three verses in Isaiah 37, simply because I forgot to add them when we did Isaiah 37. If you remember, God has just answered Hezekiah, the king's prayer to save Jerusalem, and told him that he was going to save Jerusalem from the siege of the Assyrian army. But he made clear to tell him that it wasn't in his merit, in the merit of Hezekiah, but rather in the merit of saving the kingdom of Judah and in the merit of his God's own honor and the blasphemy of the Assyrians. This is an important point because there's a reason why God felt and was hinting that Hezekiah himself was unworthy, did not have the merit, was not righteous enough to merit that the people be saved on his behalf or in his merit. The last three verses of Isaiah 37 just recount the event of the miracle of the saving of Jerusalem from the Assyrian army, which was encamped around the city of Jerusalem. According to rabbinic tradition, this occurred on the first night of Passover, the Seder night. Vayetze malach Adonai, and a messenger of God or an angel of God came down from Vayakeb b'machne Ashur, and he struck down the camp of the Assyrians, the military camp of the besieging army. 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. Vayashkimu v'boker, and the people of Jerusalem woke up in the morning. V'hinei chulam pegorim mesim, and these 185,000 soldiers were lying as corpses in the field. Vayisa vayelech vayoshav Sancheiriv melech Ashur vayeshev b'Ninveh, and the king Sancheiriv, who was leading the army, now had to retreat and ran back to Assyria, and he settled in his capital city of Ninveh and had to give up the siege of Jerusalem. Vayihiu mishtachave, and he went to pray in his temple of the Beit Nisroch Elohav, of his God Nisroch, of his idol Nisroch. And as often happens in a case where the king is down on his luck and suffered a major defeat, there is a coup. Va'adar Melech v'Sar Etzer Banav, and his two sons Adar Melech and Sar Etzer, Hiku Bacher, struck him down with the sword while he was prostrated in front of his idol. Behema nimlatu Eretz Ararat, and there were some loyalists apparently that two Sancheiriv that threatened their lives, and they ran off to the land of Ararat. Vayimloch, and the people made King Eser Hadon, his son, Beno Tachtav, became king in place of Sancheiriv. So that was the end of the siege and the end of the Assyrian army. Now at the same time, by Yamim Haim, and now we start chapter 38, Chalach Hezekiah lamut. Hezekiah became ill, deathly ill, and he was on his deathbed. According to tradition, this occurred about 3 days before Passover, 3 days before the siege of Sancheiriv was broken by the miracle which we just read about. It's interesting to wonder if this was an actual physical illness or if this was a psychological illness of extreme depression when Hezekiah sees his kingdom completely falling apart. We do know that he went to the temple to pray, and we know that God said he was going to save the people of Jerusalem. But Hezekiah would have also maybe have been very depressed by the fact that God had basically told him that you are not worthy of saving the people. I'm just doing it for my own honor. That may have caused a depression. That's, of course, just speculation on my part, but something I wanted to put out there. But either way, he was sick and on his deathbed. Vayavo elav Yeshayahu ben Amoz Hanavi, and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, came to him, to the king, Vayomer Elav, and said to the king as follows: Kol Amar Adonai, so says God, Sav leveitecha, command your household. In other words, get your affairs in order, get your will together, make sure you know who's taking over after you, etc. Ki meit atav lo tichya, because you are going to die from this illness, you shall not survive this illness. Of course, that led Hezekiah to be quite depressed, even more. Vayasev Hezekiah panav el akir, and Hezekiah the king turned his face towards the wall. Vayitpalelo Adonai presumably turned towards the wall so he can focus on God rather than focus on the people that were surrounding his bed. And he prayed to God. Vayomar, and he said, Ana Adonai, please God, Zecharna, please remember God, Et asher hitalachti lefanecha, that which I have been walking in front of you, be'emet, in truth, u'velev shalem, and with a complete and whole heart. Remember God, Hezekiah says, I have been devoted to you, God. I have been loyal to you, God. I have been loyal to you throughout. I have not worshipped the idols. I have reestablished the temple as the only place where people come to offer sacrifices. I destroyed all of the alternate altars and temples that were popping up around the state. I eliminated worship of idols, etc. On a theological level, at least, Hezekiah says, I've been loyal to you, God, and I've been straight with you. Va'tov beinachastisi, and I've been doing what is good in your eyes. Vayev Hezekiah b'chi gadol, and Hezekiah cried and cried a great cry. It is truly remarkable that Hezekiah, and this is clearly what Yeshayahu and Isaiah is trying to point out here, and we'll see this come out in this chapter and the next chapter in a very dramatic way. Hezekiah is presented as a righteous king, one who's loyal to God. And this fight that we saw between the Assyrians and the people of Judah, on a theological level, Hezekiah seemed to have it right. He seemed to understand that there's one God who's different than every other God. This God is the creator and the only one that actually has the power and ability to intervene and save, etc. However, nowhere do we see the ideas that Yeshayahu had so deeply imagined for this righteous king. If you recall correctly, if we look back at chapter 9, at the famous verse where Yeshayahu spoke so glowingly of the young child Hezekiah, who was then a son in his father's house, who was then the king Achaz, who was such an evil king that we learned about before. But if you remember what he said back then, Ki yeled yulad lanu, a son has been born to us. There is a young man in the house of Achaz who is going to take over. Vatiyam Yisrael Shechmo, he's going to take over and be the king. And what did he say then? Limarbe ha-misro l'shalom en kates. This person is going to take abundant or tremendous authority and peace, endless peace. Al kisei David v'al mamlachto, on the throne of David and his kingdom, l'achinota, to set it up, u'lesada, and to establish it, b'mishpat u'v'tzedakah, with justice and righteousness, me'at v'yad olam, forever. Isaiah had the idea back then and had the vision of Hezekiah as being the ultimate king, the one who was at the time young, not yet taken over, but the one who was going to be righteous and established a just and righteous kingdom. Nowhere in these 4 chapters, 36, 37, 38, and 39, where we've been finding all this dialogue between Hezekiah and Yeshayahu, Hezekiah and Isaiah and the Assyrians and the people, etc., do we find Hezekiah emphasizing what we would call today the social justice aspect of what Hezekiah was dreaming about, or what Yeshayahu was dreaming about, and the potential of Hezekiah. Hezekiah seemed to get the theology and the loyalty to the one God correct, but he seemed to justice and righteousness. And I point this, we need to pay attention to this when we see the response to the Hezekiah's prayer Hezekiah prayed to God, and God tells him specifically to save Jerusalem. This was in the last chapter, right? And God tells him, yes, I will save Jerusalem, but not in your merit, only because of me, in my own honor, God says. And we're going to see in some important points, and as well in the next chapter, about the what must have been the tremendous disappointment that Isaiah experienced in the king Hezekiah and his behavior in these chapters. So in response to his prayer, Vayidvar Adonai el Yeshayahu lemar, verse 4, God spoke to Isaiah and said as follows, Haloch v'amarta Chizkiyo, go to the king and tell him, the king Hezekiah, Ko amar Adonai Elohei David avicha, so says God, the God of David your forefather, not your God, but the God of your forefather, who was more righteous than you. Shamati et tfilatecha, I have heard your prayer. Ra'iti et imatecha, I have seen your cries and your tears. Hineni yosifai yomecha chamesh esrei shana, I'm going to add to your years of life 15 years. So now Chizkiyahu has a guarantee that he's going to live another 15 years and he will outlive and the siege and see the saving of his city Jerusalem. And God immediately says, I will save you from the king of Assyria. And this city I will also save, and I will protect the city. And what sign shall I give you that this will be true? And this is the sign that God will do this. There was apparently some kind of sundial that his father Achaz had established. And usually, of course, the shadow goes in a certain direction, the opposite direction of the sun. And it goes up in levels, steps or levels, ma'alot. And it always goes in a certain direction. But as a sign to you that I will keep this, I'm going to make the shadow go in the wrong direction 10 levels. It seems interesting. It's hard to know, and I don't know why God exactly chose this particular sign. But I do have an idea as to why he chose specifically a sundial that had been built by his father Achaz. My guess is that this was like a significant piece of architecture that Achaz, his father, had put up. And he was really showing that I'm going to use your father's creation, the one who was evil, the one who wasn't with me, in order to demonstrate this miracle, because I want you to know that it's your father's house. It's the kingdom of David and what it stands for that I'm preserving now, not you, not in your merit. Even your father, who was truly evil, was part of that tradition or of David's house. That would be one way of understanding why God chose this, the creation of his father Achaz, as a sign. And then, of course, Chizkiyahu was happy to hear the news that he was going to be saved. Chizkiyahu got up and recovered from the illness, and he wrote this following prayer or poem, this song of thanks to God, which we're about to read. Interestingly, it says over here that he got up from his illness. And we're going to read later at the end of the chapter that the actual healing didn't take place till later, which kind of hints to me that this may have been more of an emotional sickness and an emotional depression than a physical illness and a physical depression. Might have been an emotional illness with some physical manifestation. Because once he hears the news, he already has the spirit in order to say this thanks to God, before the actual physical healing took place, which happened later. Ani amarti, I said, says Chizkiyahu, bidmei yamai elecha b'sha'arei she'ol pukarti eter shnosai. I thought that I am going to be taken up by God in the middle of my days. In the early days, I'm going to enter the gates of hell. Pukarti eter shnosai, and I was going to remain in hell, in the underworld, for the rest of my years, the years that I was supposed to be here. Amarti lo ereya, I thought I will never get to see God. Ya bi eretz chayim, I would never get to see him in the land of the living. Lo abit adam od im yoshvei chadel, I will never be able to see more people. I will never be involved in the world of people, right, together with those who inhabit the earth. Now, it's interesting that he's seeing God in the land of the living and seeing among the living human beings, which is consistent with the understanding that Judaism has, that true spirituality is right here in this world, among actual people. It's not some esoteric concept, some spiritual concept that we see after we die, but the true experience of God is what we feel in this world. Dori nisa, so he's crying, I thought this was going to be the end. Dori nisa v'nigla mini k'ol ro'i. The place where I live is taken away from me, and it was sent into exile, just like the tent of a shepherd. The tent, gets picked up and moved to another place. It's such a temporary dwelling. I'm in this world, it's just getting packed up to move off to another place. K'oreg chayai midalo yivatzeni. My life is like rolled up like what a weaver takes and rolls up. Miyomad laila tashlimeni. From I was only here from just such a short time, just one day, one night. It feels like my life was so short. According to tradition, it seems that he was about the age of 39 when this illness happened, a young age. Shiviti ad boker ka'ari. And then I cried, or I concentrated until the morning like a lion. Ken yishaber kol atzmotai. So all of my bones were broken. Miyom ad laila tashlimeni. And I cried from day till night. I cried to God. Kisus agur kenat tzavtzev. I chirped like a bird, a swift, fast bird, which was called a sus agur. Ege kayona. I cried and like a dove cries. Dalu einai l'marom. My eyes, I were exhausted, and they looked towards heaven. Adonai ashkol li arveini. God, I am in deep trouble. Please help me. Please support me. Please give me the what I need. Ma adaber. What can I even say? V'omar li. And then God told to me, V'hu asa, and He did it. Edadeh kol shnosai al mar nafshi. All of my sleep had been gone. I could not sleep at all because my soul was so bitter from worry and from suffering from the illness. Adonai aleim yichyu. God, despite all of that, yichyu, you have given me life. U'lechol behen chayei ruchi, and you have restored me to my spirit to health. V'tachlimeni, and you have healed me. V'achayeni, and you have given me life and revived me. Hinei l'shalom mar limar. It was that all that bitterness that I had ended up for peace. It ended up converting into something peaceful, something nice. V'atocha shakto nafshi mishachat beli. And you desired my soul, and you'd rather have me here in this life rather than throwing me into the depths of the underworld of hell. Ki hishlachta acharei gevcha kol chatai. Because you have taken my sins for which you were punishing me, you have forgiven them, and you've thrown them behind your back. As someone takes something that he wants to get rid of and so to speak, throws it behind his back, so did God. Ki lo sha'ol todecha mavis yalocha. Because, and he says something that's an important idea, that once I'm dead, once I'm gone, I no longer can give thanks to you, God. So once a person is gone, no longer can he give praise to God. The place where we give praise to God is here in this world. Lo yisabru yor devor alamitecha. Those that are down in the pit, that are buried, they are not able to pray for or hope for or search for your truth and kindness. Chai, only those that are alive who can give you thanks. Kumoni hayom, like I am now today. Avlevonim, I am a father to children. Yodi alamitecha, I can teach my children, and I can teach them to go on the right path. Adonai lahoshieni. God, you have decided to save me. Unegino sainin again, and my songs I shall sing. Kol yimei chayenu, all the days of our lives, of the lives of the people. Al beit on God. Vayomer Yeshayahu. And then when Isaiah heard the prayer of the thanks of Chizkiyahu, of Hezekiah, Yisud dvela te'enim, he said, go take some figs, v'yimruchu al ashrin, and smear them over the boils on his body, vayechi, and he will then live. And this happened after he sang the song, and after we already said before that his spirit was restored to him. So there's clearly both a psychological component and a physical component to the illness. It seems that Yeshayahu picked figs which were really, in those days and in that environment, was like really basic stuff. He didn't ask for some exotic herb. He said, just take some figs and smear them on him, vayechi, and he'll get better. No, just do it. Some magical cure or some maybe not magical cure, maybe there was some healing properties. Vayomer Chizkiyahu ma'ot, what a sign is this? And Hezekiah said, wow, what a sign this is, ki eleh beit Adonai, that I will further be able to go into the house of God and worship God. Now, while there's many beautiful ideas expressed in this prayer about philosophical ideas about life and death and the purpose of life and the truth of God, etc., there is not one single mention here of the people of Israel that have just been saved, one of the most miraculous salvations in the history of the Jewish people. Not one word about justice and righteousness and social justice and feeding the poor and the innocent and so on. Not one word. The rabbis in Tractate Sanhedrin point this out and say, why is it that Hezekiah was able to sing this beautiful song of salvation and thanks to God when he himself got better from his illness? Why didn't he sing when God saved Jerusalem from the siege of the Assyrians, when God saved the people? We know that Isaiah had predicted that Hezekiah had the potential to be the Messiah. Pele Yoetzel Gibar, a son is born to us who is going to be the one who establishes justice and righteousness. And Hezekiah had the potential to be that one, and the rabbis teach us that right over here at this point was the point where Hezekiah lost that test and lost that potential. When he was only able to thank God for his own salvation and neglected to thank God for the salvation of the people. When he was only able to look at the theological aspects of God, but not take it to the next step and say, therefore I need to take care of God's people, and I need to establish justice and righteousness in the land. Because Hezekiah missed that opportunity. He missed the opportunity to be who he could have been, which is the Messiah. Isaiah, it's hard to imagine the intense and incredible amount of disappointment that Isaiah must have experienced when he saw this. We're going to come back to this in the next chapter 39 as we study it together, because we'll further be able to see how Isaiah brings out this point of the unfortunate failure of Hezekiah to step up to the plate at the moment when he needed to, and the disappointment Isaiah must have felt when this happened. Thank you so much for joining us for Isaiah 38. Looking forward to studying Isaiah 39 together.